The morning air felt heavy, not because of the weather, but because of everything Elias carried inside him. He walked the same street he had walked for years, eyes on the ground, mind filled with quiet complaints. He didn't hate his life. He just felt trapped inside it. The world, he thought, was unfairly divided. Some were born seeing gold, others only saw dust. He adjusted his worn jacket and passed the same cracked building he'd passed every day. Its windows were shattered, its walls stained by rain and time. To him, it was just another piece of decay, something forgotten, like the dreams he no longer chased. But that morning, something different caught his eye. A man standing before the ruined building, staring at it with a faint, unreadable smile. He was tall, composed, and dressed in quiet elegance. No guards, no entourage, just stillness. Their eyes met for a second before Elias turned away, pretending not to notice. He couldn't help but wonder, what could that man possibly see in something so useless? He reached his small office late again. The day was routine, papers, emails, small talk, and a paycheck that vanished faster than it came. At lunch, his colleague Mira complained about rising rent. Elias joined in, venting about how the system is designed to keep people like us crawling. It felt good to complain. It always did. By evening, he walked home past the same building. But this time, lights were on inside. The man from the morning, still there, now with workers sketching, measuring, planning. Something was happening. Elias paused, curiosity tugging at him. Probably another rich man's project, he muttered. They see profit everywhere. Days passed, and construction began. Scaffolding, fresh paint, glass windows. The building came alive again. Within weeks, it became a cozy cafe filled with warm light and laughter. Elias watched people enter and leave, each one smiling as if life made more sense inside those walls. One evening, he stopped in front of the cafe's glowing sign, the Horizon Room. He stared for a moment before walking in. The smell of roasted coffee, the gentle music, the laughter. It felt unreal, like stepping into a parallel world. He ordered the cheapest drink on the menu and sat by the window, watching the same street he had walked for years. Everything looked different from inside. Then came a calm voice. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" Elias turned. The man from before, the one who bought the place, stood beside him, smiling softly. Elias nodded. "You turned a wreck into something beautiful." Silas Cade took a seat opposite him. "It wasn't a wreck, it was just unseen." Elias frowned. "Unseen?" Silas stirred his coffee. "Most people walk through life with working eyes but blind vision. They look without seeing. They hear without listening. They move without understanding where they're going. I used to be one of them." Elias tilted his head. "And what changed?" Silas smiled faintly. "Perspective." The word lingered like a riddle. Elias wanted to ask more, but Silas stood, leaving a tip far bigger than Elias's meal. "Maybe one day you'll see it too," he said, and walked out. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. The words echoed in his head. Most people walk through life with working eyes but blind vision. He tried to push it away, but something deep inside had been disturbed. The next morning, he found himself slowing down in front of the cafe, watching people, not just moving shapes, but details, the expressions, the pace, the energy. Everything suddenly looked alive. Weeks turned into months. Elias became a regular customer, often sitting quietly in the corner. He began to notice things he'd never paid attention to. How Silas greeted everyone by name, how he listened more than he spoke, how the cafe's success wasn't just about coffee, but connection. Customers came for the warmth, not the drinks. One afternoon, Silas approached him again. "You've been observing," he said. Elias chuckled nervously. "I suppose I have." "What do you see?" Elias hesitated. "People, working, talking, living." Silas leaned forward. "No, Elias, what do you really see?" The question struck him. He didn't know how to answer. Silas continued. "The poor see transactions, the rich see patterns. The poor ask, 'How much can I earn?' The rich ask, 'What does this create?'" Elias frowned. "That's easy to say when you already have money." Silas nodded slowly. "It's not about money, it's about sight. Money only multiplies what you already see." The words unsettled Elias. He finished his drink and left, irritated by what felt like riddles. But deep down, he couldn't deny the truth he'd felt in them. Days later, he overheard two vendors near the train station arguing over rent. One wanted to quit his spot, said it wasn't worth the space. Elias stopped, thinking. The area was always crowded. People bought, waited, and lingered. Yet no one had thought to manage those spaces properly. A thought flickered. What if I rented it and sublet it to smaller traders? He laughed at himself. Who am I kidding? I barely manage my rent. But the thought wouldn't die. That night, he scribbled numbers on paper, calculating. It seemed possible. Risky, but possible. A week later, he returned to the station and made an offer. He used nearly all his savings to lease the small corner. He told no one, not even Mira, who would have surely called him insane. He started subletting space to 3 vendors and helped them organize their stalls. To his shock, within 2 weeks, he earned more than his monthly salary. He stared at the cash in disbelief. This can't be real, but it was. For the first time in years, Elias felt something shift, not just in his wallet, but in his mind. He returned to the cafe to share the news with Silas, but before he could speak, Silas said calmly, "You finally saw something, didn't you?" Elias blinked. "How did you know?" Silas smiled. "Because your eyes look awake." Elias told him everything, from the argument he overheard to the decision he made. Silas listened without interrupting. Then he said, "Most people wait for permission to see differently. You didn't. That's where wealth begins." Elias leaned forward. "So, you're saying I can actually become like you?" Silas chuckled. "You shouldn't want to be like me. You should want to see like yourself." The words landed heavy and freeing all at once. Elias realized this man wasn't teaching him business. He was teaching him awareness. Silas stood to leave, but turned back. "Perspective creates profit, Elias. Never forget that. Not every return is in cash. Some are in clarity." As Silas walked away, Elias sat still, thinking of how blind he'd been all his life. He thought of the building he used to call useless, the one that now symbolized everything he had failed to see. He whispered to himself, "What else have I missed?" The answer came as a quiet voice inside. "A lot." Elias smiled faintly, then turned toward the camera, the narrator's tone shifting, calm but inviting. If this story already made you see a little clearer, then subscribe to this channel. Like this video, share it with someone who's still walking blind. You never know. You might just help them open their eyes. Then, the weeks that followed were some of the most confusing of Elias Morel's life. He had tasted a glimpse of success, yet part of him refused to believe it was real. He carried a quiet fear that everything could disappear, like a dream that fades the moment you wake. His small venture at the train station grew faster than he expected. He organized the vendors, repainted their booths, and created a system for shared cleaning and advertising. People started calling the corner the Market Patch. For the first time, Elias felt useful, not just busy, but effective. But when his colleagues at the office found out, their laughter was sharp. "So you're a landlord now?" Mira teased one afternoon. "Be careful, Elias. Rich people have networks. You have spreadsheets." The room burst into laughter. He smiled weakly, pretending it didn't sting. Yet later that night, walking home, the words gnawed at him. Maybe they were right. Maybe this was all temporary. He passed the cafe again, and through the glass saw Silas Cade sitting alone. He hesitated, then walked in. Silas looked up, as if he had been expecting him. "Rough day," Elias sighed. "They think I'm foolish. Maybe I am. I don't have your kind of money. I'm just pretending to see what the rich see." Silas smiled gently. "Elias, seeing isn't pretending. The moment you start noticing what others ignore, you've already crossed the line between sight and blindness. But sight isn't comfortable. It separates you." Elias looked down. "Then why does it feel like loss?" "Because it always does," Silas said quietly. "Every person who learns to see must first endure ridicule from those who don't. It's the price of vision." Those words burned into him. That night, Elias wrote them down. The price of vision. Months passed, and things began to change again. Business at the Market Patch multiplied, and with it came decisions. He could either stay small and safe or reinvest everything and expand to another station. The safer part of him screamed no. But that faint, courageous voice Silas had awakened whispered, "Why not?" He took the risk. He poured every saving, every profit into opening a second site. The deal was messy, the lease expensive, but he believed in what he saw. "If this fails," he told himself, "I'll at least fail seeing differently." For a while, it worked. Then came the storm. A literal one. A heavy, brutal storm that tore through the city one night, flooding streets, wrecking roofs, and destroying both of Elias's markets. When he arrived the next morning, stalls were overturned, goods drenched, and vendors screaming in despair. Everything he had built was gone. He stood in the mud, hands trembling, mind blank. Months of effort washed away overnight. That evening, he found himself back in front of the Horizon room. The lights were off, closed early because of the storm. Through the window, he saw Silas inside, mopping the floor himself. Elias entered quietly. Silas looked up. "You lost something," he said. Elias's voice broke. "Everything," Silas nodded slowly. "Good." Elias stared at him, disbelief rising. "Good? I just lost everything I've built." Silas set the mop aside. "No, Elias, you lost what blinded you. You mistook success for sight. Now you'll truly see." Elias sank into a chair, shaking his head. "I don't understand." Silas sat across from him. "Most people chase profit to escape fear. The rich pursue vision to create freedom. You built something good, but you still saw through fear. You played not to lose instead of seeing beyond loss." Elias swallowed hard. "So what do I do now?" Silas smiled faintly. "You start again. This time not to survive, but to understand. Go back to that place tomorrow. Look not at what broke, but what was revealed." Elias went home that night with nothing but those words. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking of the ruins, the mud, the vendors who depended on him. His heart hurt, not from failure, but from realizing how shallow his vision had been. The next morning, he returned to the site. The storm had cleared, the air fresh. The vendors sat quietly, defeated. Elias walked among them, touching the ruined boards, the muddy ground, the soaked goods. Then something struck him, the land itself. Beneath the debris, he noticed the soil was firm, well-positioned between two busy bus routes. He looked around. There was potential for something bigger than stalls. He smiled faintly. What if we rebuilt better? The vendors looked up, skeptical. With what money? One asked. I don't know yet, Elias said, but we'll start with what we see. He called Silas that afternoon. I think I've found something again, he said. Silas replied calmly. Describe it. Elias took a deep breath. It's not just space, it's flow, foot traffic, shade, noise. I see how people move, where they pause, where they spend time. I see what this place could become. There was silence on the line before Silas spoke. Now you see. With Silas's mentorship and his own growing insight, Elias began to rebuild, not as a vendor, but as a developer of small community markets. Silas quietly invested, not for profit, but to watch his student mature. The new market patch opened 6 months later, stronger, cleaner, and 3 times larger. The crowd doubled, the vendors prospered, and Elias, standing among them, felt something deeper than wealth: clarity. He finally understood what Silas meant. Vision wasn't about seeing opportunities others missed. It was about seeing value where others saw nothing. One evening, after closing time, Elias found Silas waiting outside the cafe. The sun was setting, painting the world gold. You've changed, Silas said. Elias smiled softly. No, I just learned to see. Silas nodded. And what do you see now? Elias looked at the horizon, where light met shadow. I see abundance, everywhere, even in failure, even in endings. Silas placed a hand on his shoulder. Then your eyes have finally opened. They stood in silence for a while before Silas said, The poor see price tags, the rich see potential, but the wise, they see patterns. You're becoming wise, Elias. Elias turned to him. And you, Silas, what do you see now? Silas smiled faintly. A man who no longer needs me. Elias tried to respond, but Silas was already walking away, slow, steady, disappearing into the dusk like a teacher whose lesson was complete. Elias watched him go, feeling both gratitude and melancholy. He looked back at his market, at the lights flickering on one by one, and realized that wealth was never in the buildings or the profits or even the wins. It was in vision, the ability to look at an empty lot and see a future. Elias Morel learned what few ever do, that fortune doesn't begin with capital, but with clarity. The rich and the poor live in the same world. They just see it through different eyes. So ask yourself, how many treasures have you walked past today because they didn't look like gold yet? The music would swell here, gentle, reflective. If this story made you think differently, then don't just leave. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it with someone who's still staring at life but not seeing it. Because sometimes one story is all it takes to open a pair of eyes.